Today's story is about a prisoner who escapes from jail every single time, no matter how high the security is. This is the story of Japan's most dangerous prisoner, Suzuki, who is currently serving his sentence inside the country's highest security prison. As soon as the guard on checking duty walked away, Suzuki suddenly smiled and pulled one of his teeth out. A few moments later, the guards returned for another inspection. But this time, Suzuki had disappeared. The guards felt like someone was still hiding nearby, but Suzuki was no amateur. He silently moved through the darkness, avoiding every beam of light while hiding from place to place. When the guards checked the isolation cell again, they realized Suzuki had escaped. They immediately called the other guards, and within seconds the entire prison was on alert. As Suzuki ran across the rooftop, loud prison sirens started echoing everywhere. Suddenly, heavy rain began pouring down, and the story shifted back 12 years earlier. Back then, several prisoners were brought into a prison, and one of them was Suzuki. He had been sent there to serve a 10-year sentence. Because Suzuki never spoke a single word, everyone assumed he was mute. There was also an upside-down Mount Fuji tattoo on his chest. Even at that time, Suzuki was already famous for escaping prisons. In fact, he had escaped 3 times before. After arriving, Suzuki was locked inside a tiny prison cell with only a small window at the top. He carefully stared at the window, as if some kind of plan was already forming inside his mind. Outside, one of the guards confidently told the prison warden, Mr. Kanamura, that this time Suzuki would never escape. But the moment they looked through the window, Suzuki had already vanished. The warden immediately ordered the entire city to be sealed off, so Suzuki could not escape under any circumstances. However, the guards captured him within just 20 minutes. Strangely, Suzuki was found running directly along the railway tracks. After that, he was locked inside the same room again, but this time his hands were tied with handcuffs. Later, when a guard looked inside the cell, Suzuki appeared to be sleeping under a blanket. The guards angrily ordered him to remove the blanket because they didn't want to take any risks. But when Suzuki didn't respond, the guards rushed inside and brutally beat him up. The next morning, Warden Kanamura carefully studied Suzuki's old prison records. After reading them closely, he realized something strange. Every single time Suzuki escaped, he was always caught near railway tracks. One night, the warden went on a prison inspection with another guard. When they reached Suzuki's cell, they were shocked to see that Suzuki had somehow removed his handcuffs. Furious, the guards started beating him while demanding to know how he had opened them. But just like always, Suzuki stayed completely silent. Later, we see Suzuki secretly playing with a tiny metal wire he had somehow smuggled into prison. The question was, how did he even bring it inside? The answer was horrifying. He had hidden the wire inside his mouth. Using that tiny wire, Suzuki would unlock his handcuffs whenever he wanted. A few days later, the warden left for a 1-week vacation. Now, Suzuki finally had the perfect chance to escape again. He secretly pulled out the hidden wire and started unlocking the prison lock. Soon a guard came for inspection and noticed Suzuki sleeping under a blanket once again. Without suspecting anything, the guard simply walked away. But the truth was, Suzuki wasn't even inside the bed. He was clinging to the ceiling like a lizard, silently waiting for the perfect moment to escape. The second the guard left, Suzuki climbed higher and punched through the weak rooftop section before escaping once again. The prison alarms immediately went off, and the warden was informed at once. The next morning, the police prepared multiple plans to capture Suzuki. At that moment, Warden Kanamura arrived and shocked everyone by saying, "Forget all the plans. Just send one team to the railway tracks." The officers thought the old man had lost his mind. Why would Suzuki go to the same place every single time? But Kanamura confidently insisted that Suzuki would definitely be found there. And once again, he was right. Suzuki was captured near the railway tracks again. Thanks to Kanamura's intelligence, Suzuki was caught. And because of this success, the warden received a major promotion. Now he became a senior officer who inspected prisons all across the country. Meanwhile, Suzuki continued escaping from prison after prison, only to get caught near railway tracks every single time. Each year, he was transferred to a newer prison with even tighter security. But somehow, Suzuki always escaped. Because of this, the media gave him the title, the Star Escape Prisoner. Soon he became famous all across Japan. 12 years later, Suzuki was transferred into a central prison with extreme security. 10 guards were assigned only to monitor him. His prison cell was made entirely of concrete, and the door had several heavy locks. This was the same isolation cell we saw at the beginning of the story. The moment Suzuki entered the room, he carefully looked around. Once again, He was already planning another escape. One day, a guard entered the cell to deliver food. But before the guard could react, Suzuki suddenly grabbed him and handcuffed him instead. The guard immediately blew his whistle, causing several guards to rush inside. They brutally beat Suzuki until he nearly lost consciousness. The next morning, the guards added even more restraints to his handcuffs to make sure he could never unlock them again. Before leaving, they beat him once more. Day after day, Suzuki intentionally provoked the guards. They would beat him repeatedly, and his blood would drip onto the iron bars of the cell. One day, the guards beat him so badly that one of his teeth broke and fell out. Suzuki quietly picked up the tooth and smiled strangely. It looked like this had all been part of his plan. After that, Suzuki started scratching the prison wall using his broken tooth. A few weeks later, Suzuki attacked another guard. This time, he received the harshest punishment possible. The guards chained him and hung him from a restraint system for an entire year. His condition became horrifying. His body began rotting, and insects crawled over his wounds. Finally, after 1 year, the guards removed the chains. At the same time, the former warden Kanamura arrived for a prison inspection. When he saw Suzuki's terrible condition, he silently walked away. That very night, the same stormy night from the beginning of the story arrived. As thunder roared outside, Suzuki finally activated his master plan. He removed the broken tooth he had secretly sharpened over time and used it to unscrew his restraints. In reality, Suzuki wasn't scratching random drawings into the wall all those weeks. He had been sharpening the tooth into a weapon. After freeing himself, Suzuki walked toward the iron bars and started pushing them hard. Because his blood had constantly dripped onto the bars for months, the iron had rusted badly. Within moments, the bars snapped apart, and Suzuki escaped again. Later, Suzuki's childhood story is revealed. His mother died the moment he was born, and his father spent his life rotting in prison. As a result, Suzuki grew up at relatives' houses. One day, while training in the forest, Suzuki saw a strange man approaching him. That man was actually his father. While talking, Suzuki noticed the same Mount Fuji tattoo on his father's chest. But suddenly, police officers appeared to arrest the man. Suzuki's father immediately started running along the railway tracks to escape. At that moment, Suzuki swore to himself that one day he would find his father again. Back in the present, Suzuki once again escaped and ran along the railway tracks. Kanamura shouted at him to stop. And surprisingly, Suzuki actually stopped. Within minutes, guards arrived and captured him again. This time, Kanamura ordered Suzuki to be transferred to the deadliest prison in the world, Prison Island. Prison Island was built in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by dangerous currents and sharks. Most importantly, there were no railway tracks anywhere. Escaping from there was considered completely impossible. The prison itself was even more terrifying. Thousands of guards surrounded the island, and any prisoner attempting escape would be shot instantly. The moment Suzuki arrived, he was locked inside a special restraint cell. It wasn't even a normal room. Metal rods were locked tightly around his body, so he could barely move. Meanwhile, Kanamura entered the prison library and began researching Suzuki's past in old prison files. At the same time, Suzuki stood silently inside his restraints, deeply thinking. For normal prisoners, escaping from there was impossible, but Suzuki was different. Suddenly, he dislocated both of his shoulders and slowly squeezed himself out of the restraints. Another prisoner saw this happen, but was too drunk to react. At the same moment, prison sirens suddenly started ringing. However, instead of panicking, the prison warden smiled confidently because nobody had ever escaped the island alive. Meanwhile, Kanamura tried warning everyone that Suzuki was no ordinary criminal. But nobody listened. The next morning, armed guards spread across the entire island searching for him. That's when Kanamura finally revealed the shocking truth. Suzuki had never been escaping prisons for freedom. He had intentionally allowed himself to get caught again and again, only to eventually reach Prison Island, because his real goal was to rescue his father. Finally, Suzuki found the old prisoner he be.